Good morning. Welcome to Shattering Myths, the program devoted to the largest segment of society, to those of you who know that the world's religious, political, economic, and military institutions are corrupt and counterproductive. I am Yahowah. Our number, if you'd like to join us anytime over the next 2 hours, is 877-300-7645. I made a declaration many years ago when the bushwhacker decided that he was going to create a military state in America and establish the Patriot Act and create the Department of Homeland Security, America's Gestapo. We were going to become a military state. We were going to spy on Americans through the NSA. We were going to combine the FBI and the CIA and the ATC, and you name all the alphabet variations that we have, even customs. And we were going to create a new organization called the TSA, the Transportation Security Administration. And while no one could have predicted it would turn out as hideous as it has, with Americans' freedoms, their rights, their Constitution being torn asunder. The one thing that was predictable is that TSA, which had previously been a privately run inspection process, Americans following all of the hijackings around the world, did screening of bags, did screening of individuals boarding airplanes, and did a pretty good job of it, all in all. It was run by private businesses. But then the government decided, as well as we run the post office, as screwed up as we have made healthcare, driving its costs through the stratosphere as we take more and more control with Medicaid and Medicare, we are going to get into the airport security business because we're in the business of making Americans secure with the Department of Homeland Security. And I told you it was going to be a complete farce, an utter and complete waste of time. In fact, at Dulles, when I checked in, the majority of the screeners were Muslims. And if that ain't the fox protecting the hen house, I don't know what is. Well, this past week, in fact, I think it was just yesterday, a watchdog organization called the Red Team of the U.S. government decided that it would have morons check on the ability of other morons to do their job. And you know how well they did, Scott? Now, these federal morons were in the process of bringing suicide pacts and guns onto aircraft. You know what their success ratio was in stopping them?
Was this the one where they did they had 70 people go through? Something like that? Okay, so 70 people went through. I read this article, so I can give you the exact
70 tests.
70 tests, yeah. 67 got through.
67 failures, that is correct.
Yep.
Now, I went to school for a while. You've gone to school, right?
Yep.
If you scored 3 out of 70 correct, what grade would you get? Or would the teacher even bother to give you a grade?
You would have to probably, whatever grade you were in, you'd have to go back to kindergarten, restart, just do it all over.
I fly airplanes, and when it comes to emergency procedures, when it comes to even pre-flight procedures, do you know what percentage that we have to perform at every time to be considered a success, competent at what we do?
I would hope 100%. I would hope
100%. That is correct. There are some things where 100% competency is a bottom line requirement. In the case of stopping people from wearing suicide packs, explosive packs on their body, and having the detector scream, this person is wearing an explosive backpack and the person not even find it, and to take guns aboard an aircraft. You would expect them at that level of weaponry to operate at 100%, and yet they operated at
you would hope
a shade over 3%.
When they're
it's just, I mean, it's so pathetic. And you know, and the spokesperson for the federal government said, you know, you don't look at this as a failure. Look at this as a success. Rather than the bad guys who know our procedures and could get around them, finding this out, the good guys found it out. This is like, we don't want Snowden to tell Americans that America is spying on fellow Americans because it tips the bad guys off into what our capabilities are. And here we're making public a report that we couldn't find a bazooka if you tried to take one through.
Let's go back to what that guy said. Let's not look at this like it's a failure. This is a success because the good guys are doing it. We weren't actually going to blow up or kill people on a plane. Like, I don't care. You don't spin it that way to the media. You come out and you say, this is a total failure. This is
4% success.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4%.
You
success. You know, what I said, Scott, right after 9/11, I said, all you have to do is one thing. You want to preclude this ever happening again. All you have to do is one thing. It's really, really, really simple. Well, there's a smart thing to do and a simple thing to do. The smart thing to do, of course, is to preclude Muslims from flying because they're responsible for 100% of aviation terrorism. But the other thing you can do is really simple. Change out the cockpit doors. Have the cockpit doors locked from the inside. Have those cockpit doors be made of Kevlar or some other material, and do not open them in flight. It's really simple. If you do that, what is the chances that a box-cutting, wielding, screaming Muslim can fly into a building screaming Allahu Akbar?
Zero.
Zero? So that's all you had to do. That's all you had to do. Nothing more to it. Now, if you wanted to go, like, really crazy, you could also screen all of the checked bags and all of the mail that's put on the airplanes for explosives. That'd be fine, too. You know, it's really easy to do. There's equipment made that sniffs the bags. It can tell you if there's any explosive material in them. You could do that. But the carry-ons, why even bother? I mean, what are you going to carry on that's going to bring the airplane down if you can't get into the cockpit? Oh, I'm going to fill my shampoo bottle with TNT. Okay, so you'll blow yourself up. Well, you might blow up the bathroom. What else are you going to do? I mean, the whole thing was just utter and complete nonsense. And here we find that now Americans are inconvenienced 2 hours on every flight. And they're abused, they're searched, and what is the benefit of all of it? Because it's controlled by the federal government? Zippo. Oh, I shouldn't say Zippo. They had a 4% success rate. We have Chad, who's called in from Kentucky. What do you think about a 4% success rate? And you paying for it because your ticket prices have gone up. There's a service charge for that great federal service.
Yada, it's laughable.
It is.
Yeah, my first thought on the whole thing coming out is, why are they releasing this information? I could only come up with two theories in my head. Is either they want to take away more of our freedoms when we try to fly,
yes,
or they're trying to get someone to actually do something.
No, I think it is that they want to take away more of our freedoms, because if you look at the potential damage of this release, it is infinitely greater than Snowden's release. The Muslim jihadists had stopped communicating electronically decades ago. And so our NSA spying is only on Americans. It doesn't do us any good in terms of jihadists. But this is right up their alley. And you couldn't do anything that would be more revealing in terms of your vulnerabilities than releasing this report.
Yeah, I used to be naval police, and we would do a security test on our base. We never called the local papers and said, "Oh, here's the results." We just fixed the problem.
Yeah. It's stunning. It is stunning. First of all, it's stunning beyond belief. Laughable beyond belief that they have all of this multi-million-dollar equipment, and there are, I flew out of a airport in Santa Barbara. I don't have that home anymore, but I had an airport in Santa Barbara, which was, Santa Barbara is a sleepy little town. I think it's 80 or 90,000 population, and the airport is really tiny. It's a two-gate airport, and they would have at any one time shifts of a dozen TSA officers, a couple of patrolling the sidewalk, and then a couple just in the lobby, a couple in the back screening bags, and then about 6 to 8 that would be part of your, let's look at your ticket, let's look at your driver's license, let's look inside of your bag, let's put you through the multiple and your carry-on through these multiple screens. And so they had 4 sets of 12 individuals who were performing no function other than to be invasive and annoying. What the hell are we thinking about? For a flight out of Santa Barbara, from Santa Barbara, you can fly all the way to Los Angeles. Wow. It was just so irritating that we could be so stupid. And we continue. Yeah, we should talk more about this when we get back, because it is just another evidence that there is nothing the federal government does well. If we shut it down tomorrow, we would all be net beneficiaries. There is literally nothing that it does well, and most things it does very poorly. Announcing the resignation of Yahowah, who is the head of the TSA. An 11-year TSA veteran, Johnson, issued a statement outlining a series of actions he had ordered in response to the finding, including more training for all transportation security officers. More training. Yeah. You think if you had a job like that one of the things the federal government would do is to train the individuals. But no, more training. What are you going to do? If you do more training, we're going to get the success rate from 4% up to, maybe we get a 50% improvement on the success rate, and we'll get a 6% success rate with more training. The reevaluation of airport screening equipment. Now, the federal government has a blank checkbook. Just as much as you want to write. And, man, they have put in some of the most invasive equipment you can imagine. I mean, full body scan. There you stand there for all the world to see, bare ass naked. You walk through metal detectors, and then you do a full body scan while your luggage goes through an x-ray machine that takes exquisitely detailed pictures of it. And then you have all manner of scanners and sniffers that, should you have a laptop, man, they're going to not only have you turn it on, they're going to have all sorts of sniffing devices that see if there's anything approaching an explosive in that. And they need more equipment. He then said, "We take these findings very seriously." Yeah. moron. He said, adding, the numbers in these reports never look good out of context. What context? Tell me, what context would make them look good? They never look good out of context. Perhaps you could explain to me how we could have an entire branch of the U.S. government with tens of thousands of employees, paid government wages which are exceedingly high, with all the government benefits which are exceedingly lavish, with all their fancy uniforms and all their billions of dollars worth of equipment, all stealing 2 hours of our lives every time we fly, and jacking up the price of our tickets. And you want to tell me that there's a context in which to evaluate that makes this look good? Wow. But it's a critical element in the continual elevation of our aviation security. Okay, well, if this is an evolution, then I suspect that all evolution is the same. Things degrade over time. That's the nature of evolution. They don't become more complicated. They don't become more sophisticated. They simply degrade over time. And once again, we have a perfect example of a government agency starting off bad, starting off expensive, starting off wholly and completely incompetent, and going south from those benchmarks. So, is it any wonder the United States has spent hundreds of billions of dollars spying on Americans and hasn't a single example to dangle before the American people and say, this is what you got for your money? Is it any wonder that over the last 50 years that America has spent trillions upon trillions of dollars in what they call national defense and has done nothing but break things, kill people, ruin countries, make bad situations infinitely worse? They don't have a single success to show for their existence. Is it any wonder that the country is bankrupt, financially and morally? Is it any wonder that we destroyed the value of our currency? That there's no one to vote for that isn't a buffoon? We take these findings very seriously. I wish we did. I wish more Americans found their government wholly and completely counterproductive, untrustworthy, not worthy of their vote, not worthy of their support, not worthy of their patriotism, not worthy of their allegiance. Every aspect of government is as bad or worse than the 4% success rate of the TSA. I got wind of this indirectly. I was trying to buy back my old airplane. You know, I used to own a Pilatus, a PC-12, owned it for 6 or 7 years, and sold it when we bought the home in Montecito outside of Santa Barbara, which we have subsequently sold. And in that time, I'd bought a Cessna 206 and then sold it and bought a CJ, Citation jet. And sold that in December, largely because of tax reasons. The way the federal government runs its financial books made it impossible to keep it. So I'm in the market to buy a used airplane, and my first choice was just to buy my old airplane back. And the guy that owns it actually wants to sell it, but the price of my old airplane just in the last year has less than a year has gone up almost $500,000 in price. because the federal government is clandestinely buying them. It's through a company called Sierra Enterprises. And what Sierra is doing is converting these PC-12s into spy planes. That's what they're doing with them. And as a result, the federal government doesn't care what it pays for anything. So an airplane that might have been, say, 1.7 million a year ago, less than a year ago, that airplane now, with more hours on it, is selling for 2.5 million. All because the federal government is dominating the market and buying them and turning them into spy aircraft. So this next article reads, the FBI, and by the way, those were for the Navy, allegedly. The FBI is operating a small air force. The FBI, I had no idea that the FBI needed an air force, but of course with the FBI it's domestic service, so that air force is to be used against Americans. The FBI is operating a small air force with scores would be more than 40. Because you've got to have at least 2 scores for it to be scores. That would be more than 40. Of low-flying planes across the country carrying video and at times cell phone surveillance technology, all hidden behind fictitious companies that are fronts for the government, the Associated Press has learned. Just wave to them, Glenn. I'm sure that if you just look out your window and wave, they'll tip their wings and say, how do you do? What do you think, Glenn? Well, we've got, yeah, we can now, yep.
I'm here. Hello?
Good, go ahead, Glenn.
Oh, okay, I thought you weren't hearing me. I was going to say, you do know you're supposed to buy low and sell high, right?
Yes, you know, I thought I had sold that Pilatus, and I sold it 7 years ago, or 8, maybe more, maybe 8 years ago now. And I thought I sold it at really a fair price. I wasn't for sale at the time, but a gentleman came to me and says, I have a friend that wants to buy it, an associate wants to buy it. And he offered a price that was right on the money, and I thought, yeah, sure, I'll sell it. And and I would have loved it. And by the way, and he contacted me, this very individual, contacted me a month ago. And he had put $300,000 of new avionics in it. And so the 1.8 airplane, his representative said could be purchased for $2.1 million. Would I like to buy my old airplane back? And I said, sure. Sounds perfect. I'd love to have the old bird back. You know, I've got a lot of hours in it. I'm really comfortable. I can fly that thing like I'm wearing one of those glide suits. And they said, okay, fine. We'll arrange to make that happen. And he called back a day later and says, no, it's not 2.1, it's 2.5. And then he says, really, it's not 2.5. I don't want to sell it at any price right now because of the market has changed as a result of the federal government's appetite for spying.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe you can get, like, one of the planes that, like, they're using to ferry Ebola patients around over the place and then sell that in a couple of years.
Yeah, those are G5s. You know, you can buy a good used G5 for probably $40 million. So I would have to take out a loan from you. If you're willing to float me a loan, well, I'm not even sure that would help because I don't think I could even afford a flight. Now, the reason that I choose single-engine turboprops is because they're really inexpensive to fly. And the reason I got out of jets is they're really expensive to maintain. So,
I don't typically lend in such small increments. You'd have to take a larger amount,
okay.
You know, and then, yeah.
Yeah, so what do you think about these two articles? You've got the TSA scoring a robust 4% success rate, and then you have the FBI spying on Americans with a fleet, with their own air force, but all clandestine, with secret companies operating the aircraft.
It's just going insane. I mean, it's not just like secrecy and privatization and stuff like that. It's so convoluted and multi-layered, and the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, and it's obviously all corrupt as can be.
Yeah, you know what's really funny? When I had my CJ, I chartered it, and You know who paid us by far the most for charter flights? The state of California. And you know what the state of California used the charters to do? This will burn your britches. Yeah, it was right up your alley. They would ferry prisoners who had ailments because the state would only take the prisoners to whatever was the top-rated medical facility for whatever ailed them, no matter where that facility was around the country. And so they chartered private jets with 2 security guards and 2 healthcare workers and 2 pilots at gargantuan sums to ferry prisoners who had a boo-boo around the country.
Well, you know, if you're going to incarcerate someone, that person may have been incarcerated for having a roach in the back of his car, you know, and
right.
or you know, so when you lock the guy up for you know, a non-violent, victimless crime, it's very important that they take my tax money to take care of him forever and fly around like that.
If you have a boo-boo, is the federal government or your state government, are they going to charter a private jet and a crew of 6 to fly you wherever you'd like to go? And you're a taxpayer.
Yeah. If I have a boo-boo, I'm going to have to cough up an ever-increasing copay just to get it taken care of. My insurance doesn't kick in until a few $1,000s down the pike now.
You know, it strikes me that between Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act, which has nationalized health care, which was already 50% destroyed by government. Government was responsible for 50% of health care between Medicare and Medicaid, and in the case of Obamacare, just increased that. So now you've got runaway costs and ever higher consumer payments for deteriorating service. And it is rapidly deteriorating. I mean, my wife, who is a user of the healthcare system, I am not. You know, it's a number of things that I've done that are healthcare you could put in a thimble. But my wife is a major connoisseur of healthcare for a number of reasons, and what she has found is that since Obamacare passed, it's almost impossible to get quality service. Almost impossible, and we're paying. We have a deductible that's 4 times the amount. The amount that we're paying on premiums have tripled, and so the quality of the care is abysmal, and the cost for it is horrendous. And so we've got a nationalized, we're going to be taking care of you, and you can't have anybody else take care of you. We're going to have a Department of Homeland Security, which is a Gestapo, that's going to spy on you and going to send riot police to control you. We're going to tax you to oblivion, and then we're going to have a military that is larger than the rest of the world's combined, and you get to pay for it. And if you don't like it, we're going to send you to prison.
And when you're in the hospital, just remember that weary registered nurse tending to you probably has a minimum of 5 or 6 other patients. So and doesn't get a lunch break. But and as to the FBI thing, the only thing that scares me more than an efficient, government Gestapo, and inefficient is an efficient government Gestapo. I'd rather have them keep on copying a bit because they're not going to do as much damage.
Yeah, that's what I say about Islam all the time. Can you imagine if Muslims were properly educated, if they were rational? Can you imagine if Muslims actually were capable of making their own weapons? How terrifying Islam would be. I mean, the only thing that keeps Islam at bay is there's no economy in the Islamic world other than the black ooze that seeps up from under their soil. And there is not a single quality manufacturing facility for weapons in the Islamic world. They don't produce anything, and they don't, their education, there's not a single world-class university anywhere in the Islamic world. And so people are dumbed down to be stupid enough to be Muslims. But if that were not the case, then the consequence of Islam would be unthinkably horrific. But, the same thing, I guess, applies to a lesser degree to the U.S. government. At least in all their draconian measures, they're wholly incompetent.
Oh, yeah. But they're being deliberately consolidated. I mean, anyway, actually, speaking of inefficient economies, what I called in, I wanted to point out this week is, this is an interesting week because on May 12th, Christine Lagarde kicked the can down the road 3 weeks for Greece. on their default. And
although today she's in Britain because she didn't kick the can far enough down the road, and you've got the United States pushing the panic button and said, you better solve Greece, you better solve it in a hurry because the illusion of solvency is about ready to go bye-bye.
Right. Well, this Friday is when they had this other, and I remember back in the late 80s, like early 90s, when people sweating about a Central South American debtors cartel that could bring us, could really hurt us. Back then, like if these nations of South America default collectively, we're in great danger. Well, I think Greece has the ECB and the IMF by the shirt tail at the moment. Because
I think so.
Yeah,
they do. Yeah, and the reason they do is because if Greece defaults and pulls away from the EU, it becomes the model for other debtor nations to follow. And if it turns into complete anarchy, then the rest of the world knows, well, that's where we're all headed. And if it turns out even reasonably well, then other nations are going to say, well, screw it. There's no reason I should pay back the billions we owe. And it will send banks into default. It just reveals that economically, internationally, all we have is a shell game. It so happens that the banks who illegally sold the insurance policies called default swaps to European banks for the Greek debt in the U.S. They also control whether or not it's like your insurance company. You have a car wreck, and your insurance company says, "Oh no, that's not a viable claim." Right.
The banks don't want to admit that Greece is in default. The minute they admit it, it's going to trigger the credit default swaps.
Correct. And then what happens is that the EU, along with the United States, will have more quantitative easing. They'll create the fictitious myth that they've sold bonds. They will increase their own debt. They will devalue their currency, and they will let the monopoly money, and it might as well print it in pink and light green. They'll let the monopoly money give Greece another year to become even more in debt. And they will kick the can down what now is a pitted and potholed road another year. All they're assuring is that the calamity is greater when it finally occurs. There's a lot of meat on this FBI Air Force bone. Remember I said that the AP is reporting scores, and scores means that it has to be at least 40. Well, the actual number of planes as of 2010, 5 years ago, and they're buying these planes like crazy now, but the actual number of planes from a federal budget document in 2010 revealed at least 115 of them, including 90 Cessna Citation aircraft that are already, as of 2010, there were 115 of these in the FBI's surveillance fleet. The FBI, according to the AP, says that their planes now are capable of mimicking a cell phone tower. And then when they mimic the cell phone tower, they fly over homes or cars or any place, really. As they're flying over these cities, the airplane will mimic the cell phone tower, and it will send a ping to the cell phone that causes the phone to give up all of the information on whom it is registered to and where they have been. And this is so far beyond what the Gestapo used to do in Germany. It's astonishing. So there's these planes have been photographed. In fact, one of the planes photographed in flight last week by the AP in Northern Virginia, bristled with unusual antennas under its fuselage and cameras on its left side. A federal document shows that these airplanes are capable of spying and of mass surveillance. The FBI says, oh, no, they're not engaged in mass surveillance. This isn't a private program. No, it's just that we're doing it all through secret companies. And the airplanes are unusually outfitted for this capability. Oh, and by the way, the AP also said there has never been a judge's approval for the collection of this information. What do you think about them apples, Glenn? Are you so proud of what your federal government is doing in terms of its breach of the U.S. Constitution and complete forfeiture of your right to privacy?
Well, I would think that if this comes out in light and if this were ruled, to be illegitimate and then it should be shut down, I think that would be a great thing. But, if we look at this situation with the NSA collecting information, it's one thing to say, oh, it's just slap the wrist and say, that's a no, you're not allowed to do it. But I just keep hearing Ronald Reagan saying, trust but verify. How are they going to verify that they have ceased and desisted from these practices, even if you were willing to stop them?
No, they're not even hinting at this being inappropriate or them stopping it. They're going ahead full bore, a domestic air force that the FBI is flying to spy on Americans. And America doesn't seem to give a crap anymore. I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, when Snowden revealed what the NSA was doing that is wholly and completely a breach of the U.S. Constitution and a breach of our right to privacy, it should have been shut down. In a sane, moral country, it would have been shut down immediately. But no, the vast majority of politicians, about 77% of the U.S. Senate, for example, wants to renew its charter to breach the Constitution, to spy on Americans, to treat Americans as the enemy, to be the CIA, if you will, of its new enemy, which are its own citizens.
Right. Well, Americans care about their own personal lifestyles. Willfully ignorant about all this stuff going on. So between the narcissism and self-centeredness and the willful ignorance of the general populace, I personally don't see much alternative but eventual judgment or reaping what you sow.
No, of course. Hey, how about this one? You hear that the FBI labs, which are run by the Department of Justice, in their DNA analysis, they present DNA, and the FBI examiner will say that the odds of this coming from any other person are 1 in 10 billion, and they tell the jury this DNA is for this particular suspect, and the odds that it isn't are 1 in 10 billion. You know that they have been exaggerating the match by a gargantuan factor, that in most cases the match is no better than 1 in 100 or so?
I was just going to say, if it's something like that, it's pathetic,
It's pathetic. 1 in 100 or so. And think of the people that have been convicted based upon DNA-matched evidence when it's off by many, many, many magnitudes. And the FBI, no, they're not apologetic. It's just like their fiber and hair analysis, that all of the fiber and hair analysis was completely bogus, and yet people were convicted.